Hey there, parents, teachers, and lifelong learners. Welcome to today's episode of Learn and Grow, where we explore big ideas and break them down into practical strategies you can use in your everyday life. Now, here's a question to kick things off. Have you ever wondered why kids can pick up languages so much faster than adults? I mean, 1 minute they're watching cartoons, and the next they're speaking full sentences in a brand new language. How do they do it?
It's not just about being young, it's about how they learn. And the best part? You don't need to be a language expert or have endless free time to teach your child a second language. In today's episode, we're sharing the most fun and effective strategies to help kids learn a new language without tears, frustration, or boredom.
Whether you're a parent looking to give your kids a head start in life, a teacher who wants to make learning exciting, or someone who just loves the idea of sparking curiosity in the next generation, this episode is for you. And don't worry, this isn't going to be a dry lecture about linguistics. We're talking games, songs, real-life stories, and simple methods that work in real homes and classrooms.
We'll also bust some big myths like why kids don't actually need expensive classes to learn a language, and how you can teach them even if you're not fluent yourself. And I'll be sharing one of my favourite personal stories about a quick trick I used with my niece that had her speaking French in no time. Spoiler, it's something anyone can do.
So grab a coffee, sit back, and join us as we uncover the best ways to teach a language to children, fun and effective strategies. Trust me, by the end of this episode, you'll be inspired and ready to try these tips yourself. Let's dive in. All right, let's kick things off with the big question. Why is childhood such a magical time to learn a new language? I mean, we've all heard people say that kids are like sponges when it comes to learning. But what's the actual science behind it? And more importantly, what does it mean for parents, teachers, and anyone else trying to help a child learn a second language? Sophia, I know you've got some fascinating insights on this. Take it away.
Thanks, Adam. You're absolutely right. Childhood is the golden window for language learning, and it all starts with the way a child's brain is wired. You see, in early childhood, the brain has something called neuroplasticity. That's a fancy way of saying that a child's brain is incredibly adaptable and open to new information. Think of it like wet cement. Whatever you imprint during those years tends to stick and become part of the foundation. But here's the kicker. This plasticity isn't just about learning vocabulary. It's also why children can pick up accents so easily. When a child under the age of 7 hears a new language, their brain can process the subtle sounds, rhythms, and tones of that language in ways that adults simply can't. This is why a child can sound like a native speaker with minimal effort, while we, as adults, might struggle to roll our R's or pronounce certain tricky words correctly.
That's so fascinating, Sophia. And it's true. There's something almost magical about the way kids seem to just soak it all in. It reminds me of a story I read about a boy named Matteo, who grew up in Italy. His parents were bilingual. They spoke Italian and Spanish at home, and they decided to enroll him in an international school where he also learned English and French. By the time he was 10 years old, he could speak 5 languages fluently. Now, what really stuck with me about Matteo's story was how natural the whole process was for him. He wasn't sitting down with flashcards or stressing over grammar rules. He was just living. He'd watch cartoons in English, sing songs in French, talk to his grandparents in Spanish, and of course speak Italian every day. It wasn't about forcing him to learn. It was about surrounding him with opportunities. I mean, isn't that amazing?
That's such a powerful story, Adam, and it perfectly highlights what I like to call the power of exposure. Kids don't need to be lectured or drilled to learn a language, they just need to be immersed in it. And this brings me to something I always tell parents. If your child is under 7, they're not just soaking up language, they're doing it in a way that's effortless. Here's a fun fact for everyone listening. Did you know that by the age of 7, a child's brain has already developed about 90% of its structure? During this period, they're like little language sponges. They're naturally attuned to picking up patterns, words, and even the musicality of a new language. But as they grow older, the brain becomes more specialized, and that sponge-like ability starts to fade. This is why, for example, a 5-year-old can learn a second language alongside their first one, but a 15-year-old might find it much harder.
Wow, that really puts things into perspective. And I love that you mentioned immersion because, thinking back, that's how I learned my first language. I didn't sit down and study English. I just heard it everywhere. My parents spoke it, the radio played it, my friends used it. It was all around me. So, here's a question for our audience. Can you recall how you learned your first language? Was it through your family, your surroundings, maybe even a mix of both? Take a second to think about it, because understanding how we naturally learn can give us clues about how kids pick up languages today.
That's such a great question to reflect on, Adam, because most of us don't remember learning our first language. It happens so organically that it felt like second nature. And that's the beauty of childhood. Kids don't overthink it like adults do. They don't worry about conjugating verbs or getting every word right. They just listen, mimic, and experiment. And here's the best part. As adults, we can create those same opportunities for kids to absorb a new language naturally. It's not about making them sit down for lessons. It's about finding small, everyday ways to expose them to the language. Whether it's playing a song in Spanish during breakfast, reading a bedtime story in German, or even labeling items around the house in French. Small steps like these can have a huge impact.
That's such an important takeaway, Sophia. And honestly, it's encouraging for parents who might feel like they need to hire a tutor or enroll their child in expensive classes. Sometimes it's the simplest things, like turning on a show in another language or introducing a fun phrase at dinner time, that make the biggest difference. So to everyone listening, here's your first takeaway from today's episode. If your child is young, don't underestimate how much they can learn just by being exposed to a new language in natural, everyday ways. And if your child is a little older, don't worry. There's still plenty of hope, and we'll be talking about strategies for older kids later in the episode.
Absolutely. Language learning is a journey, not a race. And no matter where you or your child is starting from, there are always ways to make it fun, engaging, and effective. So, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to bust some big myths about language learning, like whether or not kids really need formal lessons and how you can make learning feel like playtime. Stick around. You don't want to miss this.
All right, so here's a quick question for our listeners. When you think about teaching a child a second language, what's the first image that comes to mind? Maybe it's a classroom full of kids repeating words after a teacher, or maybe it's stacks of colorful flashcards, right? Well, what if I told you that kids don't actually need any of that to learn a language? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But Sophia, I know you've got some eye-opening facts that are about to flip everything we've been told on its head.
You're absolutely right, Adam. One of the biggest myths out there is that children need structured lessons to learn a language. You know, the kind of formal setup where they sit at a desk, follow a curriculum, and have set goals to hit every week. But here's the truth. Children aren't wired to learn that way. Think about it. How did you learn your first language? You didn't sit in a classroom or study grammar rules as a baby. You learned by listening, observing, experimenting, and yes, even failing sometimes. That's because kids learn best through immersion and interaction, not rigid lessons. In fact, research shows that children acquire languages much more naturally when they're exposed to it in real-life contexts, like during playtime, conversations, or even watching TV.
That makes so much sense. And honestly, Sophia, that reminds me of my son. He's 7 now, but a couple of years ago, he went through this phase where he was obsessed with a cartoon series in Spanish. At first, I didn't think much of it, but one day, out of nowhere, he pointed to the fridge and said, "Tengo hambre." I was like, wait, what? Did my kid just tell me he's hungry in Spanish? He had picked it up from the show without us even realizing it. And here's the thing. I didn't force him to learn. He didn't have a workbook or a tutor. He just loved the cartoon, and his brain naturally soaked up the phrases because it was fun and engaging. That's when I realized how powerful immersion can be. even in small doses.
That's such a great example, Adam. And it's a perfect lead-in to what I like to call micro-immersion. You see, a lot of people think that immersion means you have to pack up and move to another country for your child to learn a language. But that's not true at all. You can create these little moments of immersion right at home. Here's how it works. Instead of turning language learning into a lesson, you make it part of their daily life. For example, you can play their favorite song in a different language during breakfast, or have a quick conversation in the target language while getting ready for school. Even something as simple as saying, "Good morning" in French or labeling common items in your house with their German names can make a big difference. These tiny moments add up, and they make the process feel natural and fun, not forced.
I love that idea of micro-immersion, Sophia. And it really makes sense when you think about how kids absorb things. They don't need a lot of structure. They just need exposure in a way that feels easy and enjoyable. But let's dig a little deeper here. What about the parents or teachers who feel like kids still need a classroom setting to make real progress? I mean, isn't that how most of us were taught growing up?
Great question, Adam. And here's the thing. There's definitely a place for classroom learning, especially as kids get older and need to focus on things like grammar or writing. But when it comes to younger children, the classroom model can actually slow them down. Let me explain. Formal lessons are often designed for adults, not kids. They focus on rules, repetition, and memorization. But children don't think in terms of rules. They think in terms of stories, games, and relationships. When you try to teach a child in a rigid way, you risk taking the joy out of learning, and that's when they start to tune out. On the other hand, when you focus on immersion and interaction, you tap into the way kids naturally learn. They start to connect words with actions, emotions, and context. And here's a fun fact. Studies have shown that children who learn through immersion often develop better comprehension and pronunciation than those who rely solely on classroom instruction.
Wow, that's so powerful. And honestly, I think it's a bit of a relief for parents who might feel overwhelmed by the idea of teaching their kids a language. You don't need to create a strict curriculum or become a language expert. You just need to find little ways to weave the language into their everyday lives. Speaking of which, I've got a question for our audience. Have you ever noticed your kids picking up words or phrases from something as simple as a TV show, a song, or even a trip to a friend's house? If so, think about how you can build on that. Maybe it's as simple as letting them watch their favorite show in another language or playing a fun game that uses new vocabulary. Give it a try. You might be surprised at how quickly they catch on.
Absolutely, Adam. And to anyone listening who's wondering, where do I even start? I want to leave you with this tip. Start small and stay consistent. You don't need to change your whole routine or turn your home into a language school. Just look for those little moments, whether it's during playtime, mealtime, or even bath time, and make them opportunities for exposure. And remember, kids learn best when they're having fun. So, if you're introducing a second language at home, don't worry about making it perfect. Just focus on making it playful and engaging. Trust me, the results will come.
That's such great advice, Sophia. And I think it really drives home the idea that language learning doesn't have to be this overwhelming task. In fact, it can be as simple as letting kids enjoy a cartoon or teaching them a fun phrase during dinner. So, to everyone listening, here's your challenge. Think about one small way you can add a little micro-immersion into your child's life this week. Maybe it's switching the language on their favorite app, singing a song in another language, or just saying hello in French tomorrow morning. Give it a try. You might be amazed at how quickly they pick it up. All right, let's talk about something we all love, games. Think back for a moment. What were your favorite childhood games? Maybe it was hide and seek, tag, or a good old-fashioned game of Simon Says. Now, imagine if those same games could help kids learn a second language. Sounds pretty awesome, right? Well, today, we're diving into the magic of play-based learning and why it's one of the most powerful tools for teaching languages to children. And to kick things off, I've got a funny story that'll show you just how effective and hilarious games can be. So, a while back, I was volunteering at a summer camp, and we decided to play a bilingual version of Simon Says. We had kids from all over. Some spoke English, others Spanish, and the idea was to teach them a few simple phrases in both languages while keeping it fun. Now, picture this. I'm standing there as Simon, and I say, Simón dice, levanta la mano. Some kids knew what I said and raised their hands, but others just stared at me like I was speaking alien. Then, I switched to English. Simon says, touch your nose. This time, the Spanish-speaking kids hesitated, but the English-speaking kids nailed it. By the end of the game, though, everyone was laughing and participating, switching between languages like pros. It wasn't perfect, but it was so fun that the kids didn't even realize they were learning.
That's such a great example, Adam, and it perfectly illustrates why play-based learning is so powerful. Here's the thing. When kids are playing, they're not just having fun, they're also in a state of flow. That's when their brains are fully engaged, their stress levels are low, and they're open to absorbing new information. And here's a little brain science for you. When kids are happy, their brains release dopamine. That's the feel-good chemical, and it plays a huge role in memory and learning. So when kids associate a new language with fun and positive emotions, they're much more likely to remember what they've learned. It's not just learning, it's retention.
Wow, that makes so much sense. And honestly, it explains why my son still remembers those Spanish phrases from that cartoon he loved, because he was enjoying himself. But let's get practical here, Sophia. What are some specific games or activities that parents and teachers can use to bring play-based language learning into their homes or classrooms?
Great question, Adam. There are so many creative ways to incorporate games into language learning, but let me share a few of my favorites. 1. Language-based scavenger hunts. This one's a hit with kids of all ages. You can hide objects around the house or yard and give them clues in the target language. For example, if you're teaching French, you might say, cherchez un objet rouge, find a red object, or va à la cuisine, go to the kitchen. Kids love the thrill of the hunt, and they're learning new vocabulary without even realizing it. 2. Role-playing games. Kids love pretending to be someone else, whether it's a shopkeeper, a doctor, or even a pirate. Set up a mini scenario, like a pretend cafe where they have to order food in Spanish or a toy store where they can buy toys in German. It's interactive, it's creative, and it's fantastic for building conversational skills. 3. Charades with a twist. This one's super simple but so effective. Write down actions or objects in the target language, like soltar, jump, in Spanish, or essen, eat, in German. The kids act it out, and everyone guesses what it is. It's a great way to reinforce verbs and nouns while keeping the energy high.
Those are amazing ideas, Sophia, and I can already imagine how much fun they'd be. I love the scavenger hunt idea in particular because it gets kids moving and thinking at the same time. But here's a thought for our listeners. What if you took one of your own favorite childhood games and gave it a language learning twist? For example, if you loved playing hide and seek, you could teach kids phrases like, "Where are you?" or "I see you" in the target language. So, here's a challenge for you. Think about one game you loved as a kid. Got it? Now, imagine how you could adapt that game to teach a few simple phrases or words in another language. Jot it down and give it a try this week.
That's such a great challenge, Adam, because it shows that you don't need fancy materials or a lot of preparation to make language learning fun. The games you already know and love can be powerful teaching tools if you add a little creativity. And here's one more tip for parents and teachers. Don't be afraid to join in. When kids see you playing and speaking the language, it motivates them to do the same. Plus, it creates a sense of connection and shared experience, which makes the learning process even more meaningful.
That's such an important point, Sophia. And honestly, it's a win-win, because you're not just teaching your kids, you're also bonding with them and creating memories that'll last a lifetime. So, to everyone listening, remember this. Learning a language doesn't have to feel like work. It can be as simple as playing a game of Simon Says, going on a scavenger hunt, or acting out funny scenes with your kids. The more fun they're having, the more they'll learn. All right, let's talk about two of the most powerful tools we have for teaching kids anything: stories and music. Whether it's a fairy tale before bed or a catchy tune stuck in your head, stories and music have this incredible ability to engage kids on a deep level. And the best part? These two superpowers are also fantastic for teaching languages. But Sophia, I know you've got a lot of insight on how these tools work their magic, so I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks, Adam. I'm so excited to talk about this because, honestly, stories and music are game changers when it comes to language learning. Let's start with stories. Kids are naturally drawn to them. From the moment they're born, they're hearing stories from their parents, whether it's through picture books or those little bedtime tales. The reason stories are so effective is because they connect emotionally. Kids don't just hear words, they relate to characters, plot twists, and lessons. And when you introduce a second language into a story, it becomes even more impactful. It's like this. When children hear a story in another language, they don't just hear foreign words. They connect those words to emotions, actions, and familiar ideas. This deep connection makes it easier for them to understand the meaning behind the words. And if the story is repetitive or includes familiar phrases, they'll start to predict what's coming next, which builds their language skills.
That makes so much sense, Sophia. I mean, when I think back to my own childhood, I remember listening to stories and just being captivated. And it wasn't just the story itself. It was the rhythm of the words, the way my parents told it, the expressions they used. It made everything stick. Speaking of rhythm, I've got a little something for you. How about we throw a little music into the mix? I'll sing a line from a popular kids' song, and I'll sing it in both English and Spanish, just to show how much music can enhance language learning. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Si estás feliz y lo sabes, da palmas.
Ha ha ha. Oh my gosh, Adam, that was fantastic. You know, that's such a perfect example of how music can help kids absorb a language. Songs like this don't just teach vocabulary, they teach rhythm, intonation, and sometimes even cultural context. And the best part? Kids love them. If they're singing a song in a different language, they're not worried about grammar or memorizing words, they're just having fun. And the repetition in these songs helps to cement new words in their memory without them even realizing it. So, if you're looking for ways to introduce language to kids, don't underestimate the power of music. Sing along with them, find bilingual songs online, or even create your own songs using basic vocabulary. Songs are catchy, and the melody sticks in the brain long after the song is over. Kids will remember a song long before they remember a lesson from a workbook.
I love that. And here's the thing. Whether it's a story or a song, both tools engage multiple senses at once. Stories activate imagination, emotions, and sometimes even motor skills if you add actions. Music, on the other hand, activates the rhythm of speech, helps with pronunciation, and creates a joyful atmosphere around learning. When you combine the two, you've got a recipe for success. But let's get into some practical ideas for parents and teachers. Sophia, what can they use to make this magic happen at home or in the classroom?
Great question, Adam. There are so many tools you can use to introduce stories and music into language learning. Here are a few that I absolutely love. Storybooks. Find bilingual books that are age-appropriate and have simple language. If you can't find a bilingual version, grab a regular storybook and read it in one language while pointing to the pictures. This helps kids associate the words with the images. If you can, choose books that repeat phrases or use rhythmic language, like The Very Hungry Caterpillar, because that repetition helps reinforce new words. Audiobooks. Audiobooks are a fantastic tool. You can play them during car rides, bedtime, or even while doing household chores. There are tons of free audiobooks online in various languages, and many have sound effects or songs that keep kids engaged. They'll absorb the language without realizing they're doing it. Create personalized family stories. This one is so much fun. Write a simple story featuring your family members and translate it into the target language. You can make the story as silly or as imaginative as you want. The kids will love hearing about themselves in a new language, and they'll quickly connect the words with familiar people and situations.
That's such a fun idea. I can just imagine how engaged kids would be hearing a story with themselves as the main character. And it's a perfect way to make language feel relevant to their lives. Now, Sophia, here's where I need a bit of a challenge. We've been talking about stories and songs, and I'm wondering if you could throw something my way. How about a simple children's rhyme? I'll try to translate it live into another language. It'll be fun.
All right, Adam, you're on. How about you try translating Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star into French? Ready, go.
Okay, let's see. Brille, brille, petite étoile. Oh, wait. Comment je me demande ce que tu es? Okay, I think I got it, but I'll leave it there before I mess it up too much.
That was fantastic, Adam. See, that's the beauty of songs and rhymes. They stick in your head and they're easy to adapt to other languages. You did it on the spot, which is exactly how kids pick up these patterns. And for everyone listening, you don't need to be perfect with translations. The more you sing and repeat, the more it will sink in for kids. Plus, it's fun.
Absolutely. So, to all the parents and teachers listening, I challenge you to find a simple song or rhyme in your child's favorite language and sing it with them this week. Whether it's Twinkle Twinkle or another tune they love, turning it into a language learning activity is an easy and enjoyable way to boost their skills. Okay, folks, let's talk about a topic that's impossible to ignore today: technology. We live in a digital world where everything from our phones to our tablets to our smart speakers can become tools for learning, and language learning is no exception. Kids today have access to some incredible language apps, games, and videos that make learning a new language feel like a breeze. But Sophia, I know we also need to talk about balance, so let's dive into how technology is shaping the way kids learn languages and where we need to be cautious.
Absolutely, Adam. The role of technology in language learning is huge, and it's incredibly exciting. Apps like Duolingo, YouTube, and even interactive games have transformed language learning for kids. They're colourful, fun, and engaging, much more appealing than traditional textbooks. Kids can practice speaking, listening, and even reading in a target language, all with the tap of a button. And because they're so interactive, these apps can keep kids engaged for hours, offering instant feedback on their progress. It's like having a teacher in their pocket 24/7. But, and this is a big but, we have to be cautious with how we use technology. There's no substitute for human interaction. Kids need face-to-face conversations and real-world practice to truly master a language. Plus, too much screen time can lead to problems like reduced attention span, lack of physical activity, and even disrupted sleep patterns.
Right. So while technology is an amazing tool, it's not the be-all and end-all. We've got to make sure it's used in moderation and that there's some parental involvement in the process. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's break this down. What are some of the best language apps and online resources for kids, and how can parents and teachers make the most of them?
Great question. There are a ton of kid-friendly language apps out there, and I'll share a list of my favorites. These apps are designed to be fun and engaging while offering educational value. But remember, these tools are most effective when they're part of a balanced learning routine, which includes plenty of offline activities like reading books, singing songs, and having conversations. Here are a few of the best language apps for kids. 1. Duolingo. Duolingo is one of the most popular language apps worldwide, and it's perfect for kids. The app uses a gamified approach to learning, where kids earn rewards and level up as they complete lessons. The visuals and playful elements make it easy for kids to stay engaged, and the repetition helps reinforce vocabulary. The best part? It's completely free. 2. Gus on the Go. This app is specifically designed for younger learners, usually ages 2 to 6. It uses fun, interactive games to teach kids vocabulary in a variety of languages. Kids can learn words for animals, food, and everyday objects, all through playful, age-appropriate activities. It's perfect for getting kids started on their language learning journey. 3. Little Pim. This app is excellent for preschool-age kids. Little Pim uses videos with a cute animated panda to teach simple words and phrases in various languages. The app is designed to introduce children to languages through everyday situations, like greeting people or talking about food, making it really relatable. 4. Memrise. Memrise is a bit more advanced than the others, but it's great for kids who are ready to learn phrases and sentences. It's based on spaced repetition, meaning kids are reminded of words at just the right time to ensure they don't forget them. It's a fun, interactive way to reinforce vocabulary and grammar. 5. YouTube. Language learning channels. There are some fantastic YouTube channels that focus on language learning for kids. Channels like The Bilingual Family and Spanish Playground offer videos, songs, and games that help kids learn languages in a natural, immersive way. YouTube can be a great tool, but it's important to monitor what kids are watching to make sure it's appropriate.
That's a solid list, Sophia, and I love how you've covered everything from the early stages to more advanced learning. And speaking of YouTube, I've seen some incredible language learning channels for kids. There's something about watching a fun, animated video that really captures their attention. But let's not forget that screen time still needs to be managed carefully, especially with younger kids. How can parents ensure that tech doesn't take over, but still plays a positive role?
Excellent point, Adam. While tech can be a great educational tool, it's crucial to set boundaries. Here's how parents can use technology effectively. 1. Set time limits. Too much screen time can lead to issues like eye strain, poor posture, and, of course, reduced time for other activities like outdoor play. Limit language learning screen time to about 20 to 30 minutes a day, and make sure it's balanced with other hands-on, real-world learning activities. 2. Be involved. Even though apps like Duolingo are interactive, kids still need guidance. Sit down with them while they're using the apps and help them understand what they're learning. Ask them questions about the lesson and encourage them to use the words they've learned in real conversations. 3. Use tech for social interaction. One of the best ways to leverage technology is by helping your kids connect with native speakers. Look for apps or websites where they can talk to other kids in the target language, like Tandem or HelloTalk. This gives them real, live practice and shows them how language is used in a social context.
Those are great tips, Sophia. I especially love the idea of using technology for social interaction. It's not just about listening to a language, it's about speaking it, using it, and connecting with others who are fluent. That's when language really comes to life.
Exactly. And here's something that might surprise you. Did you know that bilingual kids tend to perform better in problem-solving games? Studies show that children who speak more than one language have enhanced cognitive abilities like better focus, quicker decision-making, and superior multitasking skills. So, by learning a second language, kids aren't just picking up new words, they're also training their brains to think differently, which helps them in other areas of life.
That's fascinating, Sophia. It's amazing how learning a second language can have such broad cognitive benefits. And it's just another reason to embrace language learning, even through technology. So, to all the parents and teachers out there, when you integrate technology into language learning, make sure it's balanced, intentional, and interactive. Use it to complement real-world learning, not replace it. And when you do, you'll be giving your kids a fantastic head start, not just in language skills, but in cognitive abilities too. All right, folks, let's dive into something that might sound a little intimidating at first: creating a multilingual home environment. You might be thinking, how can we make a language stick if we don't even speak it ourselves? But trust me, this chapter is all about practical ways to bring a new language into your daily life, even if you're not fluent yourself. Let me start by sharing a little bit about my own childhood. I grew up in a multilingual household, And let me tell you, it was a fun and, at times, chaotic experience. My parents spoke several languages: Hindi, Punjabi, and English, and each of us kids had our own mix of what we spoke, depending on who we were with. At home, we'd switch between languages, sometimes in the same conversation, and it was normal. Honestly, I didn't even realize that what we were doing was so special. But as I look back now, I realize how that environment helped me develop a deep understanding and comfort with languages. And it wasn't just the language, it was the cultural richness that came with it. So, how can you replicate that at home, even if you're not raising your kids in a multilingual household? Let's bring in Sophia, who has some fantastic strategies to share.
Thanks, Adam. Your story really highlights something crucial. The language environment at home is a massive influence on language learning. You don't need to be fluent in a language to create an environment where a child can thrive. It's about consistency, immersion, and making the language a natural part of daily life. Let's go over some practical tips to help you get started. Here are a few simple yet effective ways to create a multilingual home environment. 1. Label household items. This one's super easy and can be done in any home. Take a few sticky notes and label common household items, like door, table, chair, sink, in the target language. Kids love to see words everywhere around them, and this constant visual reminder helps them associate the words with the objects in their environment. It's like turning your home into an interactive language lesson. 2. Set language hours or language zones. Set aside specific times during the day or certain areas of the house where the target language is spoken. For example, during language hours, everyone might speak only in Spanish or French no matter what. You can even have designated language zones, like the kitchen being for English and the living room being for French. This gives kids a structured way to practice in context, and it helps establish boundaries between different languages in the home. 3. Encourage siblings to speak the language together. If you have multiple children, encourage them to speak the target language with each other. Kids often respond well to peer learning, and siblings can act as language partners, reinforcing vocabulary and grammar in a natural, fun way. You can even set challenges where they have to use certain words or phrases during playtime. 4. Use media and entertainment in the target language. Switching TV shows, movies, or YouTube videos to the target language is a great way to immerse your child without them even realizing it. For example, you can set the language on Netflix to Spanish and watch a favorite show together. Or, if your kids love YouTube, find language learning channels that make it fun. Listening to songs, watching cartoons, or following kids' shows in a second language will reinforce vocabulary and sentence structures.
I love these ideas, Sophia. And I think the key takeaway here is creating a space where the second language is just part of the fabric of everyday life. It's not about forcing it. It's about making it natural and enjoyable. But what about parents who don't speak the language they want their kids to learn? That's a big concern for a lot of people. How do they encourage language learning if they're not fluent themselves?
Great question, Adam. And this is something I hear all the time. You might be thinking, how can I raise a multilingual child if I don't even know the language? But the good news is, there are still plenty of ways to make it happen. One solution is language exchange playdates. Look for local groups or online communities where your child can meet other kids who speak the language you want them to learn. By having playdates with native speakers, your child gets the exposure they need, and it's a fun, natural way to practice speaking without pressure. They'll learn through play, just like they did when they first learned their native language. Another great option is to hire a language tutor for kids. You don't need to be fluent to hire a tutor who can speak the language with your child. Tutors can help reinforce lessons, provide structured learning, and keep your child motivated. Plus, it gives them an opportunity to practice with a native speaker who can offer feedback and guidance.
I love those ideas, especially the playdates. It's amazing how much kids can learn through social interaction. And I think it's important for parents to remember that they don't have to be fluent themselves. Creating a multilingual home environment doesn't require perfection. It's about creating a supportive, immersive space where the language is valued and used regularly.
Exactly. And to all the parents listening, don't get discouraged if you don't speak the language yourself. You don't have to be a linguistic expert to help your child succeed. It's about the little things you do every day to create a multilingual environment. The more exposure your child has to the language, the more they'll absorb. So, whether it's through labeling, setting up language hours, or connecting with native speakers, you can make language a natural and enjoyable part of your child's life.
All right, let's get real for a moment. While the idea of raising bilingual or multilingual children sounds amazing, it's not always easy. Parents face all sorts of challenges when it comes to language learning. From kids resisting the language to just plain running out of time to practice, the hurdles can feel overwhelming. But don't worry, we're here to help you navigate through those rough spots. Sophia, let's talk about the most common struggles and how we can tackle them head-on. Where should we start?
Great point, Adam. I think the biggest challenge most parents face is the resistance from kids. Let's be honest, kids often don't want to do things they think are extra work, and learning a language can feel like just that. Whether it's a 5-year-old who'd rather be playing with toys or a teenager who thinks they don't need another language, resistance is a huge roadblock. But there are ways to make the process feel more like play than work.
Resistance is tough. I've definitely been there. What are some strategies that actually work when kids are dragging their feet?
First, turn everyday moments into language learning opportunities. Even if you're busy, there's always a chance to sneak in some practice. For example, during car rides, instead of zoning out to the radio or talking about the weather, try turning that time into a fun language challenge. You can play games like I Spy using the target language, or make up stories with new vocabulary words. This is especially effective for younger kids, but even older kids can get involved in a spontaneous game of 20 questions in the second language. You'll be surprised at how much they absorb during these seemingly casual moments.
I love that. Making the most of everyday moments, like car rides. It's kind of like sneaking in learning without the pressure. But what about the lack of time? In today's busy world, how can parents find time for language learning?
Time is definitely one of the biggest challenges, and let's be honest, there's no such thing as extra hours in the day. But again, it's about being intentional with the time you have. If you can dedicate just 10 to 15 minutes a day, that's enough to make a big difference over time. Even if it's just reading a short story in the target language before bed, or watching a 10-minute language video with your kids during breakfast. The key is consistency. If you can make these moments part of your daily routine, it'll feel less like a task and more like a habit. Another idea is to involve your kids in the process. For example, if you're preparing dinner, you could ask your kids to help by naming the ingredients in the target language or following a recipe in the second language. It's all about integrating the language into your regular activities.
Making language learning part of the routine, even in small chunks of time, seems like a great way to keep things moving forward. But there's one thing I've noticed. Sometimes kids pretend they don't understand, especially when they don't want to try. Have you ever seen this in action, Sophia?
Oh, absolutely. Kids can be master manipulators when it comes to avoiding something they don't want to do. And I've got a funny story to share. I had a student once who would pretend they couldn't understand any English. This was a child raised in a bilingual household. So one day I brought in candy as a reward for speaking English during the lesson. The moment the candy came out, this child suddenly switched to fluent English. No problem at all. It was like the magic of sugar broke the language barrier. This is a classic case of kids testing boundaries. They know how to play the game, and sometimes they just need a little motivation. But it's important to remember that kids are learning all the time, even when it seems like they're not paying attention. So don't get discouraged if they resist. Just keep offering opportunities for them to engage with the language.
That's hilarious. Candy really does have magical powers, but seriously, resistance and testing boundaries are a big deal. So, what's your advice for parents who feel like they're hitting a brick wall with their kids?
My advice? Patience is key. It's not about getting everything perfect or immediate results. Language learning, especially for kids, is a long game. The process might feel slow at times, but you'll start seeing results when you least expect it. Celebrate small wins. Maybe your child starts saying a new word or remembers a phrase without being prompted. Those are the moments to cheer about. The more you celebrate, the more motivated they'll feel to keep going.
You're right. Those small wins are crucial. And I think sometimes as parents we get focused on big milestones, like full sentences or fluency, when really the tiny victories are just as important. Every new word or sentence is a huge step forward. I think that's a great place to wrap up this chapter. Patience, small wins, and making learning fun. It's not about forcing anything, but rather about creating a supportive and positive environment where language learning feels like a natural, enjoyable part of life. All right, let's take language learning to the next level. So far, we've covered a lot of ways to learn a language, but one crucial aspect that can often get overlooked is the cultural immersion that comes with it. Language isn't just about vocabulary and grammar, it's deeply tied to culture. So how can we bring the culture of a language into our homes without hopping on a plane to another country? Sophia, this is right up your alley. Let's dive in.
You're absolutely right, Adam. Learning a language isn't just about speaking it, it's about living it, and that includes understanding the culture that goes with it. But the good news is, cultural immersion doesn't require travel. There are so many creative ways to expose kids to a new culture, and these activities can be just as exciting and engaging as any trip abroad. Here are a few fun and easy ways to bring culture into your home. 1. Cook traditional recipes. Food is such a powerful part of any culture. Try cooking traditional dishes from the country where the target language is spoken. Imagine making tacos for a Spanish lesson or sushi for Japanese. You can learn the names of ingredients, kitchen tools, and cooking verbs in the target language while preparing the meal together. Kids love hands-on activities, and this gives them a sensory experience of the culture through smell, taste, and touch. Plus, they'll be so proud of their cooking skills. 2. Watch foreign films or TV shows. Movies and TV shows are an amazing way to immerse your child in the culture of a language. Whether it's watching a classic French film or a fun animated movie in Spanish, you can expose your child to the sounds, expressions, and cultural nuances of the language. If the kids are younger, try watching kids' shows or cartoons in the target language. You can make it a weekly tradition, like movie night, but with a cultural twist. Even better, don't just watch for entertainment. Pause the film to discuss the story, the characters, and any cultural elements that come up. 3. Celebrate cultural holidays. One of the most fun and memorable ways to experience another culture is through its holidays and traditions. Pick a few holidays from the country or culture of the target language and celebrate them at home. For instance, you could celebrate Chinese New Year by making red lanterns and learning about the zodiac signs in Mandarin, or celebrate Bastille Day by reading about France's history and cooking French pastries. Celebrating holidays will teach kids about traditions and values, making the language come alive in a meaningful way.
I love these ideas. You're absolutely right. Food, film, and holidays are some of the most exciting ways to really get immersed in the culture. And I have to add, community events are another great way to bring culture to life. Whether it's a local cultural fair, festival, or language exchange event, there's often something going on in your community that can help kids feel more connected to the language and culture they're learning. A lot of communities also have language meetups, which can give your kids the chance to practice with others and experience cultural traditions firsthand.
Exactly. Community events are such a fantastic way to connect with the culture, but there's another idea I love that's totally virtual: Pen pals. You can set up virtual playdates or exchanges with kids from other countries. There are platforms that help connect young learners with language partners around the world. Imagine your child having a pen pal in Brazil and sending letters, or even better, voice messages, back and forth in Portuguese. Not only does it boost language skills, but it also opens up a window into how other kids live, what they eat, and what they care about.
Pen pals. That's such a cool idea. It's amazing how technology can create opportunities for connection that we didn't have when we were kids. And it's a great way for kids to get used to real-world language use in context. Things like slang, informal phrases, and even the differences in culture that influence the language they're learning.
Exactly. And of course, it's about making these cultural activities fun and interactive. You don't have to be an expert in the culture or language to make it enjoyable for your child. The goal is to create an environment where curiosity thrives, and your kids naturally become excited to learn more about the language they're hearing and using. All right, let's get creative. Imagine this. You have the whole weekend free, and you're going to plan a cultural day at home. What activities would you include to bring the culture of your target language to life? Would you cook a traditional meal? Watch a movie in the language? Or maybe invite a friend over to share the experience? I want you to think about it right now. And hey, share your ideas with us on social media. We'd love to hear what you come up with.
Great challenge, Sophia. I can already picture how much fun that day would be. And what's great about it is that you can do it for any language, and no matter what age your kids are, you can adjust the activities to suit their interests. I'm sure some of you listeners are already planning your own cultural days after hearing this.
Exactly, Adam. Bringing culture into your home is one of the most rewarding ways to enhance language learning. It turns language into a living, breathing experience that your kids can taste, feel, and see. So, whether it's through food, film, or festivals, don't forget to add a little culture to your language learning journey. And as always, keep it fun.
All right, here we are in the final stretch of our podcast today. We've covered a lot of ground: how to teach, how to play, how to immerse. And now it's time to talk about something that's crucial in every language learning journey: measuring progress and keeping motivation alive. It's easy to get discouraged when results aren't immediate, but Sophia, I know you have some great insights into how parents can spot real progress and keep their kids motivated. Let's jump in.
Absolutely. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to language learning, especially with kids, is seeing the progress. It's not always as obvious as it might be with math or reading, where you can see clear steps from one level to the next. Language development happens in more subtle ways, and sometimes it's hard for parents to know if their kids are actually improving. But don't worry, there are definitely signs of progress that you should look for. First, it's important to remember that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. So, be patient. Some signs of progress to watch for. 1. Increased vocabulary. Kids will start to use new words and phrases in context. They might not be using complete sentences at first, but you'll hear them sprinkle in new words here and there. Maybe your child says thank you in the second language when they get a gift, or they start using colour names without being asked. 2. Improved pronunciation. Even if they're not fluent, you'll notice that their pronunciation becomes clearer, and they'll begin picking up the correct accent without much effort. The younger they are, the easier this is. 3. Comprehension. One of the best signs of progress is when your child begins to understand more than they can speak. So, if they're responding to simple commands or understanding familiar phrases without needing translation, that's a huge milestone. 4. Confidence in speaking. At first, kids may hesitate to speak the language because they're afraid of making mistakes. But as they learn, they'll become more confident in using the language without fear of errors. That's when you know they're really embracing it. It's important to remember that these signs may not appear overnight, but if you're paying attention, you'll notice gradual improvement over time.
That's so reassuring to hear. Progress doesn't have to be fast to be real. But I think one of the biggest challenges for parents is keeping kids motivated when they're not seeing immediate results. How can parents keep the enthusiasm alive?
Great question, Adam. Motivation can definitely fluctuate, and that's normal. The key is to celebrate every little win along the way and keep the process exciting. Here are some strategies to keep motivation high. 1. Reward systems. Kids love rewards. Create a fun visual progress chart where they can track their milestones. Every time they achieve something, whether it's learning 5 new words or completing a language game, add a sticker, mark off a box, or colour in a square. Rewards don't always have to be big. Maybe after a week of consistent learning, they get a special treat, or they earn a movie night in the target language. 2. Gamify the learning. Incorporate games into your language practice, like I mentioned earlier, scavenger hunts or charades, but also digital games like language learning apps or online quizzes. There's something about the interactive, competitive nature of games that makes learning feel more like fun than work. You can even make it a family competition. 3. Set achievable goals. Help kids set small, achievable goals that are easy to reach. For example, this week, we're going to learn how to order food in Spanish, or let's master 10 new words by Friday. It helps kids see their progress and stay motivated to continue.
I love that. The visual progress chart is such a great idea. It makes the journey feel rewarding, and who doesn't love a good sticker, right? But I think the hardest part is when kids hit a slump. Those moments when it feels like the learning is just too hard, or they just don't want to keep going. How do you keep their motivation up through those moments?
Slumps are totally normal, and honestly, they happen to everyone, not just kids. The important thing is to normalize the ups and downs of the process. Kids are going to have days where they don't feel like learning, or they might get frustrated with their progress. But that's okay. I always tell parents that it's completely fine for kids to have off days. Sometimes a little break or a change of pace is all they need to come back refreshed. When motivation dips, I recommend shifting the focus away from strict lessons and instead creating fun, language-filled moments in everyday life. Go on a walk and practice naming things you see in the target language. Or maybe watch a fun, light-hearted show or movie in the language. Keep it low pressure and let the language flow in natural, enjoyable ways.
That's such a good point. If we push too hard, it can make kids associate the language with frustration instead of fun. And I think it's so important for parents to model the behavior they want to see. If kids see their parents actively learning, maybe picking up a few phrases themselves, they'll feel more encouraged to keep going. It's not just about teaching the language, it's about living the learning process together.
Exactly. When kids see their parents learning, it shows them that it's okay to make mistakes and that learning is a lifelong process. Whether you're picking up a new word in the target language or trying out a phrase at dinner, you're setting an example of curiosity and perseverance. Plus, kids love it when their parents join in and make learning a shared experience.
And that wraps up today's episode on the best ways to teach a language to children. We hope you're feeling inspired and ready to start implementing some of these fun, effective strategies at home. Remember, language learning is a journey, not a race. Celebrate every milestone, big or small.
Absolutely. Whether it's through play, cultural immersion, or just making language part of your daily life, there's no wrong way to make it fun. Keep the motivation alive, and remember the most important thing is to enjoy the process.
If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with other parents who might be on this language learning adventure too. We'd love to hear your thoughts, goals, and any challenges you're facing, so drop a comment below.
And be sure to check out our next episode, where we'll be wrapping up everything and sharing a few final tips for making language learning a natural part of your child's life. Thanks for joining us today. See you next time.